Hi everyone, I'm Carl Kurtz, President-elect of the club, and I'm going to be moderating our program today. And let me add my welcome on a Good Friday afternoon, the best place to be in Boulder. So, does one of you, there you go, thank you. This November's ballot issue on the annexation and development of the property known as CU South has been so much in the news that it needs little or no introduction. But there's one confusing aspect of this measure that I want to make sure everyone understands before we begin. It was working beforehand, we tested it. Okay, so here's the language that's going to appear on your ballot that probably will arrive in your mailbox in the next week or two. And it seems to me that most people, most voters, when they look at this are going to say, huh? So what does it really mean? Well, because this is a repeal of a city council decision in September 2021 to approve the annexation of CU South, allowing for flood protection, dedication of open space, and building of affordable housing. A yes vote means stopping the project, at least for now. A no vote on repeal means upholding council's decision and continuing the project. In other words, a no on repeal means yes to the project, and a yes on repeal means no on the project as proposed. Got it? Okay. So our two presenters today have been highly visible in the community and also need little or no introduction. You can read a few bio details on this slide for yourself. What I want to call attention to is that one of the things they have in common is an extraordinary demonstrated commitment to our community. And I would like to invite you, regardless of your position on this contentious issue, to recognize their public service and welcome them today. Thank you. Now for the rules of the day, which both presenters have agreed to. There will be 3 rounds to this program. The first round, with Steve Pomerance going first and Sam Weaver going second, that was decided by a coin flip just a few minutes ago. That'll be 8 minutes each. We will strictly enforce the time limits. David Driscoll is our timekeeper sitting up here, and David, hold up that 1 minute sign. Okay, that's be the 1 minute warning, and then he's got a time sign. So you can hold it up, when you do it, hold it up nice and high and people will be able to see you. Great. There'll be a second round of 4 minutes each in the same order, Steve and then Sam, that will allow them to respond to points made in the first round and expand their remarks. Then we'll move to audience questions. Note that I said questions, not speeches, please. Please be mindful that Boulder Rotary Club does not advocate on public policy issues. We're here to learn and better understand a complicated public policy issue. Please also remember parts of that Rotary 4-way test that we recited at the outset, to be fair to all and to build goodwill and better friendships. So let's move to our program, and Steve, you're on. You have to wait till Fred has it up, okay? That's not it.
That's a bit of advocacy. I'm Steve Pomerance. I'm a former city council member. The deal we're considering today is the annexation agreement passed last year. The city only got enough land for inadequately sized flood control pond, and that only addresses one of the multiple sources of flooding that hit Southeast Boulder in 2013. And it's too small to contain the floods that we can expect with climate change. The university, on the other hand, got to build development as big as downtown Boulder, 2.25 million square feet plus a stadium, with too many people for the housing, leading to more housing problems, and which itself is not adequately affordable and with inadequate controls on traffic. So it will be hugely impactful. The deal is also a bad one for our water supply, because the city is trading good water for bad and the city is not collecting the fees it should. I've been involved in successful negotiations when on council with CU and also with the federal government over the NOAA building, so I know that good negotiations can be done, but this is not the way to do them. That's why I'm asking you to vote yes on 2F, repeal this annexation agreement, and tell the city to go back and do it right. This involves developing alternatives and some leverage so the city can get what it needs, in addition to CU trying to get what it needs. And there are actually alternatives that don't require CU's involvement at all. One point that people seem to have forgotten in all of this is annexation is a totally voluntary process. The city council has zero obligation to annex this land. Okay, first problem. Flooding came from multiple sources, not just South Boulder Creek. You can see the list. So a 100-year pond will not stop flooding in the area. So you know on this map, north is to the right, and that diagonal line is US 36. Worse, even with the detention pond, many buildings will still be flooded. Those are the ones that are in red. Only the green ones will be protected. I'm sorry, you can't see all the green ones easily, but there are a bunch of green ones too. Almost all the damage that occurred from that flood was not going to be prevented by this 100-year pond. In fact, there was only 1 million of 40 million damage that came from South Boulder Creek directly. This survey was confirmed by FEMA data, by the way. Flooding can get a lot worse than in 2013. This year already, in 1 month, there were 5,000-year events. St. Louis, Kentucky, Illinois, Death Valley, and Dallas-Fort Worth. Remember the big flood in Pakistan? A third of the country flooded. The flood in Yellowstone was an atmospheric river. It can happen even in the Rocky Mountains. A better alternative to the 100-year pond is floodproofing the buildings themselves. This protects against flooding from all sources. I did the calculations based on the inadequate data that the city has done on this because they never really studied it. And it looks to be $10 to $20 million cheaper, maybe more than the pond, and it gives you protection. The city did originally consider a 500-year pond, which makes far more sense. But CU said, no, they want their 129 acres for development, and that precluded the pond, or at least an easy version of it. The annexation agreement gives CU 500-year protection for its 129 acres, but Boulder only gets 100-year protection for its neighborhoods. Not fair in my view. Almost all of the cost difference between a 100-year and 500-year pond, 24 million of the 30, is the dirt filled to raise CU's land. Now, the people have said, oh, CDOT says you can't do it. Well, CDOT never said that. There have been requests, what are they called? Colorado Open Record requests for anything they said. The big issue that they raised, which is a legitimate one, is that the 500-year pond will increase flow under the bridge, but it's only 6%, and that can be solved multiple ways. Even the city's own concept design report says you can deal with 500-year design. So the only issue really is CU. 500-year pond would protect much more. So why wouldn't CU compromise? Because the city council has no leverage. The one concern that somebody has raised to me is that this pond will create a false sense of security and lead to even more damage because people may believe they are protected when they're not. If you remember that, the picture, I think it was the second slide, a whole lot of the buildings in the area are not protected. Street flooding is not a deciding issue, mainly because most of the streets in the area don't have storm drains, so they're going to flood no matter what, pretty much. Flood protection is needed citywide, so why is the focus on Southeast Boulder? I was on the study group that worked on that recently. Could be 30 to 50 years or more to get that work done. The city needs a funding plan to get it all done, and maybe CU wouldn't be so demanding if they knew they might have to wait 30 to 50 years and be at the back of the pile if the city did flood control on the buildings themselves. Affordable housing, the requirement's 10%, way too low. The city's requirement is 25. So why does the CDU get away with 10? The 2-to-1 floor area ratio that's allowed, which is 2 square feet of residential for 1 square feet of non-residential, that's not enough residential. It's going to push people out into the rest of the city and force prices up even more. Now, how big is this thing? It's as big as downtown Boulder. Same floor area, almost exactly. Same acreage, almost exactly. And the height limit for CU is 55 feet, which is the height limit for downtown. Traffic. The traffic will become intolerable. There are a whole bunch of issues around the traffic stuff, and I couldn't possibly go through them in this meeting. But there's a very simple solution to the whole thing, which is install electronic counters and automatic gates, and that was not dealt with or considered. The trip cap's too high. Even if they did deal with it, this is a complicated issue I won't go through right now. And if CU doesn't reduce the trips, the city really doesn't have an option. Fundamentally, the problem was the city didn't create any bargaining power. They didn't really do the planning reserve analysis. Local floodproofing wasn't explored, and focusing on the rest of the city wasn't considered. And one more point on the planning reserve. The staff said, oh, it's going to take years, but the truth was all they needed to do was water or sewer analysis, which would have taken a couple of months. And it's, in distance-wise, it's only like 0.4 miles further from the campus. This issue I will leave behind. And there you are. There's more.
Check, check. All right, well, I will start out. The name of our campaign is a reminder for how to vote, and that is to vote no on 2F. And the reason that you're gonna vote no is because our community can't afford any more delays in the flood protection for 2,300 people that this will afford. You've seen me, and I'm here, and I was mayor for a couple of years and on council for 8. And I came on council in 2013, a couple of months after the 2013 flood happened, which was indeed a 1,000-year rain event. And it created a 100-year flood in the South Boulder Creek watershed. And the point of the annexation is threefold, but it starts with safety for our citizens. And then a big focus on that land, which you bought in 1995, is that we preserve the really great riparian habitat which is there. I'll talk about that. And also we have a housing crisis in Boulder, which we're all familiar with, and it's a great thing to see CU stepping up to their part in the solutions to that. The CU South property is 308 acres, and we have looked at that property for many years, and when we did the comp plan in 2017, we divided it into 3 areas. The lower right is the open space zone. That's a third of it. And so 119 acres will be permanently protected. That is the entirety of the 100 and 500-year flood plan in the open space zone. Up at the top is the flood control zone. We need 36 acres for flood detention. 24 acres can be used for CU rec fields. And then the development zone where the housing will go and the 750,000 square feet of non-residential that will be built. So if we look, this is how that acreage plays out. 60 acres will be flood detention, 119 acres will be permanently protected city open space, which it is not now. And then the 129 acres is the area where development can occur. Just for reference, the main campus at CU is about 300 acres, so this whole thing is about the same size as the main campus, which has about 9 million built square feet on it, whereas this will have about 2. Benefits of flood protection. As I said, we were quite clear on council that we could not do this annexation if there was any development in either the 100-year or the 500-year floodplain. So all of that was taken off the table. There will be no development in any floodplain. We cannot create any additional flooding to downstream properties with the project that we build. So that is one of the reasons why we can't do a 500-year project, is because of that restriction. 2,300 community members and 1,100 dwelling units will be lifted out of the regulatory floodplain and out of danger. And the most important thing for me is the citywide benefit. You may hear about a small portion of the city is protected, but 2 of our main gateways to the city for both evacuation and for emergency response, that is Foothills Highway and Highway 36, will be protected from overtopping as they did in the 2013 flood by this project. So it's not just the people, which are of course critically important to protect their lives, it's all the people in the city who need to get in and out during those events. This is just me showing you. On the right is the floodplain mapping that is done. And you can see that the blue curve there is the 500-year floodplain. You can see a lot more detail, but you'll notice that the open space zone overlaps completely with the 500 and 100-year floodplain, which is to say the part of the map and the 119 acres at CU South will have no development in the floodplain whatsoever. The 119 acres of open space is the second great benefit of this property. The South Boulder Creek watershed is a beautiful riparian area. There's a lot of city open space out there now. And what this will do is not only allow us to connect up to that existing city open space, but to restore 40 acres inside the levee, which are currently dried out. This whole area used to be a gravel mining pit, historically, has been for decades. And in order to do that restoration of wetlands, because some will be damaged by the flood wall, we have to be able to add new habitat. And in this case, that new habitat will be a little bit further upstream on South Boulder Creek, and it will be restored with ditch water shares, which we receive in this deal with CU. So a critical element of this entire multi-pronged deal that we have made, which is quite fair, passes one of the Rotary tests, is that we get the water on site to be able to restore a whole bunch of additional habitat. The current plan the city is looking at is up to 40 acres of habitat restored for about 6 that will be lost. So it's a huge gain. And there are provisions in the annexation deal to make sure that noise and lighting from the nearby development don't have negative impacts on the open space. All wetlands disturbed, which are currently classified as wetlands by this flood control project, will be restored, and any wetlands that will be displaced by any CU development will also be required to be restored. And one of the things I thought was interesting was if we restore 40 acres of currently dry land into wetlands, that's an additional 2,500 tons of carbon that will be stored, which is not currently being stored. So this is a model project for using land-based carbon sequestration. Housing is a critical issue in Boulder. I don't think I need to dwell on this much, but there will be 100 to 150 units on 5 acres of land that CU is going to allow the city to build deed-restricted, permanently affordable housing to people making up to 60% of the area median income. That will be affordable housing with a capital A. The rest of the housing that CU is going to develop is going to be targeted at upper-class students as well as faculty and staff, and that housing will be governed by CU's principles, so it will not be market rate housing, it will be whatever CU decides to charge, which will have to serve its mission of providing housing for its people. And in addition, as Steve mentioned, we have a requirement that the housing be built first before the classroom space and that it be built 2-to-1 in preference to the classroom space. And so this is a housing-focused development project that has great controls on the development that will go there. So the management here, we do have agreement from CU. State institution doesn't have to follow our 55-foot height limit. They agreed to do so because it's an annexation, which is a contract. We have the lowest impact near neighborhoods, so the stuff up against existing housing will be limited to 35 feet and lower density. No floodplains will have any development in it, in case I didn't say that a couple times already. And the 2-to-1 ratio will be maintained throughout. You heard about transportation as a concern. This is the only major development in the history of Boulder that has a trip cap. Vehicle trips on and off this site are limited. At build out to 6,300 per day, it will be monitored multiple times a year and penalties will be paid if those targets aren't met. This process was fantastic. It has been going on a long time. And when we started the final negotiations with the university over the objections of the attorneys, we released 2 drafts of the annexation agreement as it was in process so we could get feedback from the public about what they liked and didn't like. It is a legally binding agreement. It is contractual. And with that, I will say we've hit all of the main points and there is no plan B. So this must happen for the good of the people of Boulder.
Steve, go ahead. Okay.
Okay, working backwards here, my usual fashion.
Speak into the mic.
Oh, sorry. No plan B, huh? There are plan Bs, just the city didn't explore them. One plan B, swap land for land in North Boulder next to in the planning reserve. What would that take? It would take, according to CU, they wanted to know, could it really be annexed? So one evening meeting with the county commissioners, a couple of months work on sewer and water to make sure you can deliver it and at what cost, then that becomes a plan B. Second plan B is flood-proof the buildings themselves. That actually protects everybody from all flooding, and this will not, guaranteed. The city's data shows that. So in that case, you invest less money, you get better flood protection, and there's no annexation of CU South. That seems to me a pretty good plan B. And third plan B is floodproof, do all the floodproofing for the rest of the city and let CU sit there. And when they finally realize that they're going to be 50 years before they even get considered to be annexed, maybe they'll start to deal. Trip cap. The trip cap's an interesting notion. As I said, if the city had actually said to CU, we're going to measure you real time, you just put strips in the pavement, and we can measure the trips instead of this sampling a few times a year, and we're going to have gates. And if you exceed the trip cap, the gates get closed. Now that would be a trip cap. What they have is nothing. The affordable housing, as I said, it's 10% of the total. That means 90% of it's whatever CU wants to charge. I think that the restored wetlands part is really good. Don't get me wrong, that was a really good part of it. On the open space, however, if you look at the 1982 comp plan, it allowed, if I remember right, 80 acres for low and medium density development, and all the rest of it was open space. That shrunk in this deal. So in fact, there's less open space, not more open space than there was. In terms of delay, it took 8 years from when the flood happened to when they really got a serious plan, which is way longer than it should have. And then when the citizens said, oh, we want to have a vote on this, and had to repeal it, put a repeal on the ballot, they could have put it on the ballot in 2 months. That's the 60-day, you have to have a 60-day minimum window. Instead, we wait another year. So all this hurry up thing to me is interesting. Yeah, it's hurry up when we want to get something done, and however, we don't really want to hurry up when we don't want to get it done. On the 500-year pond, everybody's got different data, it looks like. There's this argument, oh, we can't build it because of, we can't increase, this is a FEMA requirement, you can't increase flooding downstream. That is true. However, in the study that the city does, not my study, it's the city study, the city study says by changing the pipe sizes, don't get me into the technical details of the different pipes, changing the pipe size, shrinking the pond a bit, and there was one other solution, which I can't remember right now, you can eliminate the problem. So I don't think that's a real problem. Sam and I could probably argue about that forever, but we'd really have to sit down with the real data and go through it. Trying to see what else is here. No development in the floodplain, that's a thing the city did that was good. And on the ditch shares, yeah, use ditch shares, but the problem is the city has to supply CU with an equivalent amount of treated water. Sir?
Yeah, thanks. Awesome. All right, well, I guess this will be the end of our talking time, and so I want to touch on a couple of quick points, and then I want to close with a little more lengthy. Could you advance the slide for me, please? So I guess I'll start with go beyond. Let's see if I can do it. There we go. So one thing I want to talk about is how many people will be here. I think it's really important to think about. There will be 750,000 acres of non-residential, so classroom and research facility. And what you will hear from some of the flyers out there is that this is 7,000 people. That's insane. I don't know where those numbers come from, because if you look at the number of employees at CU, it's 8,000, and they have 9.7 million square feet between the main campus and the east campus. So that's an equivalent of about 620 employees. If we want to take something that's going to look more like it, we just look at the east campus. There's 2,600 employees at the east campus and 2 million square feet, which would amount to about 1,000 people total at the CU South site working there. And there's going to be 1,200 dwelling units built there. So this project will actually be a accomplishment that no one's done before, where we built more housing than we built jobs at a site that's a multi-use development. And there's no cap on the housing, so it can get bigger and bigger and bigger. So the idea that there will be 7,000 new employees here is something that I don't know where it comes from, but if you do the math based on what we have on the ground at the main campus and the east campus, it's 1,000 or less new people. And I think it's worth pointing out that the 100-year flood project is about the biggest we can do at this site. I've talked to the engineers and I spoke to them again this week, and it is really about whether you can balance everything to detain the water but not increase flooding downstream, and the answer is no, you cannot do that. The 100 years is about the biggest that can technically be built, and that doesn't even take into account the fact that the 500-year would wipe out a whole bunch more of that really great land down there, so it's got bigger environmental impacts, which is why our open space board recommended against the 500-year plan. Council accepted that recommendation and recommended the 100-year plan instead. And with that, I'm going to stop on the slides and say to you, we live in a time where we must ask the question about what we're willing to do to protect our community from the threat of climate change. We know it's here, and asking for perfection, the 500-year plan, which would not actually necessarily be the plan we'd choose to build because it's not fair to the other 15 drainages in Boulder that we need to protect. We need to say we have to move now. This is a great plan. It is totally a fair compromise. I'm wearing my grandfather's Rotary tie, which I got when he passed, and my father's been in Rotary for many, many years, and that question of is this fair to all concerned is probably the key of the four that I have around this deal, and I think the answer is a resounding yes, it is fair. CU gets to develop a third of this property for its educational mission, and the university and the city have been tied at the hip for a very long time. The entire history of the city has been about the university and education and our great community developing alongside each other. CU did not get everything it wanted here. They only have 129 acres out of 308 they can develop on, and they have to follow the city's development rules, which they never do anywhere else. So this is a compromise. We did not get all 308 acres as city property. That ship sailed in 1995, but we're going to get half of the land under city control for flood protection and permanent open space protection. And I don't think there's a chance we could negotiate with a better partner on this, and one that they held their own. They got what they needed out of this deal, but so did the city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you both. Now it's your turn with questions. Vanessa will be on this side of the room with a microphone. Pam will be on that side of the room. Mike Brady is our Zoom host. We have almost as many people online as we do here in the room. So I'm going to go this side of the room, that side of the room, Zoom, and repeat. And when you give your question, please stand and give us your name. And Steve and Sam, we didn't set any formal limits on your responses. We'll just count on you to be brief and fair in not taking up too much time. So, okay, Vanessa, are you set to go?
Hi, my name is Stan Goralnik. Moved here in 1973 when there were 10,000 students at the university. They said the goal was 15. I forget, there was one at 22,000 and what have you. There are now 36,000. The increase in the number of students does not benefit the city.
Can you get your question, please,
Yes,
Stan?
exactly. Is there any way to put into this that the university will not have more than 36,000 students or 37, whatever you agree on, and that there'll be significant penalties if that were the case?
Who wants to go first?
So the university in the last 5 years in Boulder has grown the student enrollment about 1.7% per year. And that is not a really high rate, certainly way less than the 4% that is claimed by the folks who are asking you to do a yes vote. We cannot bind a state institution. These are elected members, the regents, who govern the institution. And so we negotiate with them, but we cannot create a rule without changing state law that would do any such thing as limit the growth at the university in Boulder. So we negotiate with them and we encourage them to build as much housing as possible. And when they take our advice, we should say thank you.
My personal experience negotiating with CU had to do with the East Campus. CU wanted to develop a portion of it that had environmental constraints at least from the perspective of those of us on council. I shouldn't say all of us, some of us. We prevailed. We told CU basically they weren't going to get street access for their East Campus, which they were in the process of considering building, unless they agreed not to develop that land. When they realized the situation, they agreed, and then we let them develop the rest of it and provided them street access. I give you this example because if you don't play hardball sometimes with people, you can't get anywhere, but sometimes if you do, then you can.
Okay, on this side of the room, Pam. We got any questions over here?
Do we have, do we have some?
Here in front.
Here, okay.
Thank you. My name's Jared Reese. I just noticed the 60 acres of flood protection, seems like 30 were really for flood protection and some portion was for the CU rec recreation fields or something, are those part of the flood protection plan, or how will that interact with the flood protection plan?
So those 24 acres, so you're right, there's 60 acres designated as a flood control zone, and 36 of those will be permanently owned by the city utilities and managed for utility and detention purposes. The other 24 acres can be fields, but there can be no structures built there. So it can only be open structures because that may be inundated. So during the 100-year flood, when the detention fills up, that whole 60 acres will be covered. And so only the 36 acres owned by the city will be permanently off limits to other activities. We decided that the 24 acres would be great for fields and things which could flood from time to time, but would not be under standing water.
Mike Brady, do you have a Zoom question?
I do. Matt and Hillary, you had a question that you posted in the chat. Wondering if you could unmute yourself and ask your question.
Certainly. Good afternoon. My name is Matt Ambrosiak, and I just had a question about the flood wall being constructed along US 36. Given that the South Boulder Creek technically outlets at El Dorado Canyon, why are we focused on a 20-foot tall concrete retaining wall along US 36 as opposed to context-sensitive mitigations between El Dorado Canyon and 36?
So there were multiple studies of further upstream options. So by the time I came on to council, many of the ones all the way across 93, all the way towards El Dorado Canyon, as the questioner asked, had been studied and found unsuitable. They wouldn't provide a lot of the downstream protection this would anyway, but in any case, they were found unsuitable by people who came before me. And where we looked was between 93 all the way down to US 36 along South Boulder Creek. And the only place to make the detention is where, unfortunately, there was a dam built already, which is Highway 36, because it is the effect of Highway 36 that makes this flood problem so dangerous to everyone downstream. It acts as a de facto and poor dam already, which is how you get the storing of water and overtopping. So the answer is we did extensive studies of far upstream long ago, and we did a full year of examining with our open space board of more passive ways to try and do upstream. All of them were found to be more environmentally damaging, ultimately to provide the same level of flood protection.
Any comments here? No? This side of the room, Vanessa?
Gotcha. Excuse me.
Sally Powell Ashby. I would like a visual. I'm just not really good at abstract. So can you use this space and give me 55 feet height? And also, you know, where on 36 this is going to be so I can really visualize this.
If you could bring up one of the presentations, that'd be great. I'd try, but I'll say that this building probably is 55 feet. You know, it's been a while, not in tide, but from the outside, if you go look at the roof line here, I'd have to check for sure. Let me give you an example. The Hotel Boulderado is a little above 55 feet. I think that might be 61 feet by the city code. And so if you need something to think about, think of the Hotel Boulderado. Everything will be smaller than that. And the other part to remember about the site, which is kind of neat, is it slopes down. And so the height limit up against the neighborhoods, let me just get to the, one more, come on. It's not moving. Can you go back one for me? So 55 feet is the limit downtown. You'll see some buildings downtown that are 55 feet. Those are only allowed in the lower portion of the CU South property. So there's a portion that is up the hill that's right along the Martin Acres neighborhoods that are just right there. The height limit there is 35 feet. That's the highest part of the property. As you go down to the east on the property, you'll remember it drops away where the gravel mining was. It's the lower part where the higher buildings will be allowed. And if I can get to the, I just want to show you the, there. This is 35 feet. This is the area of restricted height. And out here can be 55 feet. So this area near the neighborhoods, these are the houses. We picked one of the houses, we picked the height of the house.
But we can't find anyone, so.
Sorry, Zoom folks, I was pointing it out to the person who asked, but there's a plane which extends across the property, which limits height to 35 feet near the existing houses and no more than 55 feet in the other lower parts of the property.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Sam, how do you get that? Can you get that back? Yeah, because that's actually relevant to this.
And you have a laser pointer on that.
Okay, oh, great, thank you. This is actually an important issue from my perspective. Think about it this way. The houses here, let's see if I can get this to work. No. All right.
Right there.
Oh, there, gotcha. Sorry. The houses along here, this is Majestic Heights actually, not Martin Acres, are roughly, they're typically 2 stories plus a peaked roof. So we're talking, 25, maybe 28 feet tall. Now, right here, it's 35 feet. So those buildings could easily stick up above the tops of the buildings in Majestic Heights. You go out further, once the property drops off, then it goes to 55 feet. So then you're still at that same top height. So if you want a picture of it, you look at it now, there's Majestic Heights. Everything in the development area could be above that height. Is that clear?
Thank you. Let's go to this side of the room.
Oh, wait a minute, who was that?
Okay. Hi, my name is Ben Binder. I've been living in Boulder since 1971. Sam, you mentioned that the city was going to get 36 acres for flood control. In a document prepared by the university that said that land is in the floodplain is only worth $37,500 an acre. So for the main reason for this complex annexation is to obtain property worth $1.3 million.
Can you get to your question, please?
Okay, the value of a single-family home. On the other hand, the university's paper said that the city is waiving $10,600,000 in capital facility
Sir, may I ask you to ask a question?
Yeah. Okay, so is it worth waiving $10,670,000 of capital facility impact fees to obtain a property worth $1.3 million? Thank you.
I don't know what the $10 million impact fees that Mr. Bender is referring to are, but I will tell you that we did have some discussions about deferring facility connection fees, and the answer from the city was no. All fees will be paid as they are due. The only exception to that is an irrigation connection, and because we were able to get those 30 shares of water rights, we are in fact giving CU water for irrigation. So it's a 1-to-1 trade, again fair per the Rotary principle. So it's a 1-to-1 trade of water, and so we are not making them pay us for the plant fees for a small amount of irrigation water. I'm not sure what the 10 million being referred to is, but again, I'll stress, I think this is a great deal, and I think all the financial pieces are quite favorable to the city.
Very brief, we want to get one more question in.
Yep. With regard to the money, 3 things. The fees, the city is not collecting the fees that it should, given that the city is giving up to CU treated water from a highly reliable supply in exchange for irrigation water, which is not treated and not anywhere near as reliable. So that's the big issue with that part of it. The other piece of the money is that CU is not paying the same kind of flood control fees that you and I pay monthly on our bills, and that money goes to building flood control facilities. And I did the math on it, as my usual fashion, And it turns out that 30 years of those fees would pay for all the floodproofing at CU, which they're not paying for.
Thank you. You have another question on Zoom, Mike?
Yes, sir. Crystal Gray, would you mind unmuting yourself and asking your question?
Sure. Thank you very much for holding this, first of all. I have a question on affordable housing. I served on the city council for 8 years, followed by planning board, and was also on an affordable housing board. But the city's annexation goal is to get 50% permanently affordable. And my question is, the agreement only calls for 10% permanently affordable. So would CU increase that amount above 40%? And Holiday neighborhood is 42%. So they can more equitably and fairly serve their lowest income staff, faculty, the people that do the maintenance, the people that do the landscaping.
Thank you for the question, Crystal. And I will start by saying one thing about this. This is an interesting situation where we're dealing with a state institution. We have fewer levers than we do with the private. But if for some reason the developable portion of this property were ever to transfer out of CU's hands, it is a requirement in the annexation agreement that any development have 45% affordable housing. So if for some reason CU doesn't build CU housing for CU faculty and staff, and it transfers into the private domain some decades into the future, there will be 50% deed restricted affordable housing built at that site, or nothing at all. That's the first thing. The second thing is we are very happy to have CU building housing. In fact, everything about this deal is structured for them to build more housing. While it would be great for us to be able to dictate the prices they charge for that housing, that is not the city's role. That is the university's role and the regent's role. So to the extent that we would like to see the university, which just announced another 5,000 units of housing over the next 20 years, including 400 new ones just north of Boulder Creek coming in the next few, we should encourage CU to build more housing and make it cheaper. So that is our role as citizens, to talk to the regents. Our city council people should be talking to the CU representatives in Boulder to get them to build more.
A couple of things on this. Back earlier in the discussion, there was this thing about how many people, CU people, employees and or students are going to be on this site. Sam talked about it as all employees. There's no guarantees of that. With regard to what happens if the city were to sell this, if CU were to sell this, or if CU keeps it, there's a fundamental issue floating here, which is that this agreement could be changed by 5 council members. The citizens have no say. This thing is not locked in stone. The only thing that locks it in stone is who gets elected to city council. And if CU gets the people they want and they decide they want to build more, they go to the council, council says fine, then they get to build more. And that means another referendum.
Okay, I understand. We have one more question over here, and then we're going to bring it to a close.
I didn't think I was going to get this. Hi, thank you for doing this debate. I'm Teresa Cizurek, and I want to dig deeper into the financials, because what I believe is that the citizens of the city of Boulder are going to be overburdened by this agreement that was made by the city council, and that CU in the state of Colorado.
Please ask us as a question, Teresa.
And so therefore, can you please explain what is the burden financially from the current agreement on the city of Boulder citizens versus what should normally be done?
Thank you.
That's a complicated question because the annexation agreement is so long. I'll just throw one piece of this in here. The transportation issue. CU is supposed to spend, if they exceed their trip caps, leaving aside all the problems with measurement and all that, they're supposed to spend $5 a day dealing with the traffic. The only problem is they already give people eco-passes, which was the basis on which this $5 was made up. So what are they going to do? Then who ends up dealing with the traffic? The city. You want an example of how that gets handled so far? The underpass that's getting built at 30th Street, the one that's caused all the traffic jams over the last, whatever it is, year and a half, guess who's paying for that? Almost all of it's the city. CU's got like, if I remember right, it's like 23 or 24% they're paying for, even though the only reason it's getting built is for CU's people that go to the East Campus.
So the estimated cost of the project, the CU South, is about $60 million. And for reference, the current capital improvement plan just passed through council and the Water Resources Advisory Board. That had about $50 million worth of other flood control projects. So as far as your question about does this match the level of expenditure we're doing all across the city, the answer is yes. In fact, this is more important than the Goose Creek project, which is about $35 million in the sense that it protects those two gateway evacuation routes. And so I would say this is a perfectly good deal. In fact, it's better than most of those other deals because we get all these attendant open space and housing benefits. But it is a fair deal in the analysis of spending our money for doing flood protection. It matches very well with two other projects we just passed this year.
Thank you. On behalf of the club, David Driscoll gets the last comment. And first, let me thank David. He partnered with me in putting together this program, so really appreciate that.
Steve and Sam, 37 years ago, in 1985, Rotary International launched its Polio Plus program to seek global polio eradication through the mass vaccination of children. Since then, Rotary has contributed more than $2 billion and countless volunteer hours to immunize more than 3 billion children in 122 countries. As a small expression of our thanks to you for all of your hard work and your time in attending and presenting today, we will donate 100 doses of polio vaccine in each of your names to the Polio Plus program.